The solar octave. If we reflect upon it, try to understand the meaning of the ray of creation, and the existence of the suboctave from the sun, many inexplicable and apparently irreconcilable things will become clear to our mind. We begin to align our thoughts about life on Earth, and of our situation, with our personal journey. Speaking in an external way about the ray of creation, it is fairly obvious that physical life on Earth depends upon the physical sun. Imagine life as we know it, in darkness, it would be very different, though of course still exist. But for the physical light and heat of the sun, life would exist only in the deepest regions of the ocean and on entirely different levels. Every green leaf, every blade of grass, every form of algae floating in the sea, is a minute solar machine that receives energy from the sun, and by its means manufactures from air, water and minerals, food substances, upon which all animal life, all creation feeds. Each level, each stage, feeds upon and nurtures the level below it. Each level is the food, the sustenance and growth, helping to form or develop the level above it. Their interrelationship is symbiotic, it is dependent and organic. We need to reflect upon that often, on many levels. When we speak of the intelligence of the sun, we are speaking of another light, seen only internally by the mind, the light of intelligence, and so we are speaking of the ray of creation in an internal sense, as a vertical scale of intelligence, and being of expanding conscious awareness as we ascend it. In this regard, the intelligence of the sun is divine, in relation to the intelligence of the earth. In the vast evolution of the ray itself, on inconceivable scales of time, the intelligence of the earth may reach the level of the sun. But this is not necessarily guaranteed. The earth may also die having attained nothing. The mystical planet 9 may have been just such a failed planet. In the same way, the moon may or may not reach to the intelligence of the earth. We cannot grasp the sun or earth or moon as beings, as intelligences. One reason is that we see them as cross-sections of themselves, as mere circles in the sky, just as two-dimensional beings, whose world was limited to a large sheet of paper, would see a human only where they cut their plane, as a circle, as a slice of the person, such as we see in a book of anatomy, or Egyptian paintings on the wall of a monument. But from the standpoint of this system, the moon is a growing and developing being, and in time, may attain the same level of being as the Earth. Then, near it, a new moon, asteroid Toro, discovered in 1971 or one of the 11 other minimoons rotating around our planet, will in its turn grow significant enough, and this Earth become its sun. At one time the sun was like this planet Earth and our Earth was like the moon. Earlier still the sun was like the moon, across vast scales of time. This work teaches that the whole universe is evolving, which means that our ray, with our moon, our Earth, all planets of this system, and the sun, are all evolving, as well as all the other infinite number of rays scattered throughout this galaxy, other galaxies, and the universe. But parts of our ray may fail, at the allotted period of time, to have reached the necessary stage of its development, and so will be destroyed. As noted, if the evolution of man depended upon the evolution of the total ray of creation itself that reaches us, then our chances would be remote indeed. Insofar as man is part of organic life, and organic life serves the purposes of our ray, our evolution would be held back, until all the processes of the cosmic evolution of the moon and earth, of the planets of this solar system and the sun above us, have been fulfilled, collectively. But man has other chances, a unique opportunity, which is due to the suboctave of the sun, in which we are created, for man is specially created in this small octave, where we can either rise or fall. We can reach the level of the sun, or fall to the level of the moon. The choice and freedom of will are ours in every moment. Fully developed man, man number 7 or man in the 7th dimension, has reached the intelligence of the sun, has attained full development in that dimension, and is under only 12 laws, so for him there is freedom. For all freedom is gained by rising in the vertical scale of creation, and so passing under fewer laws. At the same time, man number 7 has attained immortality on the scale of the life of the sun. He has understood linear time, traversed the fabric of time and attained a time body. There are different levels of man, so to speak of mankind as a whole is not enough. Which man do we mean or imply? People living on Earth can belong to very different levels. Just as there are different levels of man, so too, there are different levels in the universe, regarded as a vertical scale of being, or scale of intelligence. The intelligence of the sun is divine to us on this earth. The influences of the sun reaching us through the suboctave are of a higher order than are those of the planetary world, or world 24, which are again higher than those at the level of the Earth, 48, or those coming from the moon beneath us at 96. We can be under the influences of the sun, or the influences of the planets, the Earth or the moon. And for us there are certain possibilities of making a choice of influences, of passing from one influence to another. For example, if we were to begin to struggle with negative emotions, begin to pass out of just one of the influences of the moon. If we remember ourselves, begin to move first under planetary influences, then eventually under the influences of the sun. But first we must learn to make an inner choice, and to do so, must know a great deal about ourselves, and about different eyes in us, about parts of centers. The influence of the sun reaches higher centers. So when a person lives in mechanical parts of centers, they are under far lower influences. It is important therefore to understand one thing, the impossibility of becoming free from one influence, without becoming subject to another. All work on oneself consists in choosing the influence to which we want to subject ourselves, then actually falling under that influence. It is here, through long observation, that we must know just what we want in this regard. This mechanism called organic life on Earth not only transmits forces down the ray of creation, but creates within itself certain forces, which pass to the growing moon, and assist in its development. The moon feeds on organic life, apart from receiving life forces passing down the ray. For example, all useless suffering on Earth is food for the moon, such as negative emotions that we waste energy upon in every moment. Pain is food for the moon, and for this reason it is sometimes said that organic life is a pain factory. Pain and death feed the moon, and a certain quantity is required. For this reason sacrifices were initiated in past ages, by those who understood laws during great antiquity. It is why wars are fought, and why mankind periodically appears to pass through cycles of mutual self-destruction, brought about through planetary influence, causing lunacy and mass hypnosis, hive mind, where we are made to act without reason. Many things could be said, taking organic life only from the point of view of a mechanism, inserted at a particular point in the ray, for a very particular purpose, in serving the great ray of nature. Understand, it is nothing personal, mankind has no significance in the ray itself, save as part of organic life. But with regard to the sun, which creates us, we have the possibility of greater significance, if we choose to find it. Here there is a door open to us, not leading up the gigantic ray itself, but up a separate ladder, Jacob's ladder, which lies alongside it. This is one meaning of the parable of the prodigal son. Man can return to the Father. Many other significant things are said in the New Testament connected with the solar suboctave. We have seen that the sun wants something for itself in creating humanity. Man is not created simply for the purpose of the ray, but is created for the purposes of the sun too, as an experiment in self-evolution. Unless this self-evolution is fulfilled in sufficient volume, the sun itself will not receive what it needs for its sustenance, and so will not be satisfied, it will not be nourished as required for its ascension. Take for example one of the many parables referring to this from the Gospels. A certain man had a fig tree planted in his vineyard, and he came seeking fruit thereon, and found none. And he said unto the vinedresser, Behold, these 3 years I come seeking fruit on this fig tree, and find none. Cut it down, why doth it also cumber the ground? And he answering saith unto him, Lord, let it alone this year also, till I shall dig about it and dung it, and if it bear fruit thenceforth, well, but if not, thou shalt cut it down. See Luke chapter 13, verses 6-9. Do not try to understand this parable literally, but understand it psychologically. See that it means that man has certain possibilities, which can come to fruition in him, and unless some fruit is produced, then man will be cut off, as were other experiments before our evolution. All that has been said about the creation of the universe, through the action of the law of 3, and the law of 7, about the suboctave of the sun, should make it impossible now for any of us to say, if there is a God, then why does he allow things to happen on the earth as they do? However, we have to make our own individual effort of thought, with regard to all that has been said about creation, about the ideas and diagrams shared, and then answer that question clearly, answer with conviction from a new understanding. For unless we can arrange our thoughts on this question, which is confounding, and a stumbling block to the vast majority of people, the right connections in our mind, in our intellectual center, will not be made. According to the ancients, God must be justified. Looking around at life, we find this difficult if we fail to understand creation. We will remain blind to the difficulties and restrictions involved in creation, to the doors left open, and the opportunities given, and so will secretly harbor a feeling difficult to define, but negative in character, that is capable of shutting us off from the higher development of understanding. We must get things the right way up in our minds, and cannot do so unless we realize the conditions and limitations of creation. The difficulty is that even when people come into contact with esoteric teaching, they will not listen to it, or if they do not understand it, do not grasp what it means and take hold of it themselves, as one takes hold of a rope. We have only to look sincerely at ourselves, to realize how difficult it is to work, and how much we sleep. Yet the real, most intense meaning of man on earth, lies in this suboctave from the sun, into which we can grow internally, and in so doing, come under different influences. In our case, we need to subject ourselves to the influences of the work, and then follow them, through practice. For once mankind loses all connection with the intelligence of the sun, it will inevitably be destroyed, and that is perhaps the danger today, with demographics and social decline. It is the same thing on the scale of individual man. Once we lose contact with the better eyes in ourselves, once we lose all faith, all meaning, all affirmation, all deeper understanding, and all feeling for this work, we destroy ourselves. And when life assumes evil or subjective, self-serving forms, then a mankind easily weakens. If the work, however, is built up in our mind, so that we think from it, about all things in life, then nothing can weaken us. In life many things are started which turn out quite differently from what was expected of them. The starting of anything can be represented by the note do. The next stage of its development can be represented by the note re, and the next stage by the note mi. If the development of things were easy, there would be no reason why any particular development should not proceed successfully to its fullest stage. The octave would be completed. But two factors prevent this. First, the passage between the notes do and re, then re and mi, requires effort to keep the direction of the development in correct alignment with its starting point. For example, when something is started, say an international society for the preservation of peace, or a society for fair trade, then this starting point sounds the note do. But as the development of the organization proceeds, owing to misunderstandings and disagreements, to many other conflicts of interest, the original line is not quite adhered to. It begins to deviate to one side, or to the other, of the original direction. Instead of developing in a straight line, it starts turning and deviating in direction as illustrated. The result is that things in life initiated with one objective may turn out to produce completely contradictory results. A society of peace may instead become the source of war. The second factor in preventing the full and successful development of things is the check, constriction or slowing down point between the notes mi and fa. When anything develops up to the stage mi, the place of obstruction is inevitably encountered, and unless a shock is received here from outside, the octave will never proceed. The further developmental stages of that thing will not be reached. So apart from the tendency to deviation, there is also the point where a retardation, or a check appears, called the place of external shock. Everything develops through stages, but can only develop rightly by fulfilling the law of 7. Deviation is not proceeding by the law, and to halt at the place of shock is failure. Each note must be sounded fully at each stage. For example, to speak or read and write, a child must learn their letters before they learn words. They must learn words before attempting grammar or forming phrases, and then they will receive a shock from life, because they are surrounded by other people who are speaking and writing and reading. Then, the child will pass to fa. But if they have not sounded do properly, if they have never learned their letters, if they have not sounded re strongly, if they have never learned their words from letters properly, then their powers of speaking, reading or writing will be limited accordingly. We all know the student who never has learned the subject, and on the other hand, we can all understand what is meant by one who is well-rounded. When a person develops through the correct stages, and so becomes proficient, through the shock given by their tutoring, to attain a level of craftsmanship, then we have a development proceeding in harmony with the law of 7, and rightly knit together with purpose and intent. In the case of the marvelous development of a human being from a single cell, shocks are given at certain points in the progressive evolution of the various parts, and of the body as a whole. One cell, by dividing into 2, and the 2 into 4, and the 4 into 16, until 50 stages of division are reached, in 9 months, producing 1 trillion living cells. The dividing process is due to the law of 3. The ordering, the arranging and integration of a whole developing human of living cells, with the shocks given at certain points, is controlled by the law of 7. The first shock in the first octave in the whole process is of course given through fertilization. There are many ways of seeing how things reach a certain stage, and cannot go further without help from outside, without some external shock. Have you ever thought that nature brings things to a point and stops? But mankind can give a shock, and then take things further in their development. Think of wheat, for instance. Loaves of bread do not grow in a wheat field. Think of the uses that man makes of raw materials, provided by nature. Looking then for a moment at illustrations. A diagram is only a means of understanding. It is like a map. A map is a diagram of a country, which gives the position and relation of things. The whole ray of creation, including the solar suboctave, is a map. But it is a very strange map. Ordinary maps are either on one scale or another. You can have a map of the town you live in, showing the position of your house. Or you can have a map of the county you live in, showing only your town but not your house. Or you can have a map of the world which shows neither your town nor your house. Or you can have a map of the solar system, in which the world appears as a mere dot. This is what is meant by different scales. The ray of creation is an extraordinary map because it is not on one scale but on many different scales. Take the note C, also known as T, which stands for Sidereal or stars in the Great Ray. This note is called all possible systems of starry worlds. If we take the ray in its physical or external meaning, then this note C represents a map, showing all starry systems. The diameter of the physical universe as shown by the 100-inch telescope is 600 million light-years, and in this vast incredible space 100 million enormous stellar systems exist, each containing 100,000 million suns. The next note La in our ray is only one of these stellar systems, our own Milky Way. La, which means lacteal way or galaxy. This note is on a far smaller scale. The next note Sol or So represents only one of the thousands of million of suns in our galaxy, namely, our sun, and so on, till our minute moon is reached. Every note represents a map. On a different scale, and this ordering of scales, at different levels, is due to the law of 7, which enables us to find the position of our Earth in the universe. For this reason the law of 7, or the law of octaves, can be said to be the law that gives the relation of the part to the whole. But for this law, the creative activities of the three forces would not be bound into any fixed and firm relationship, or order. They would not be organized but merely chaos or 192 parts and components of some random mass. It must be understood that the universe is a vast, living, coordinated organism. And everything created is created at a certain point, and on a certain scale in this vast organism, in which everything is connected, and nothing is independent or isolated from anything else. Everything is created, and knit together from the heights to the depths of the universe, by the double action of the law of 3, and the law of 7. Which brings us to what is meant in this work by relative understanding. In order to understand anything rightly, we must know something about the whole, before we can understand the part. For example, we cannot understand this Earth by taking the planet by itself. We must understand something of the solar system, and then again of the galaxy and so on, in order to have any right understanding of the Earth. In the same way, we cannot understand the town that we live in, unless we know something of the country we find ourselves in, and again about the continent, and finally of the world that we live in. To try to understand a thing by itself, as something isolated, is impossible, for everything is connected with and depends upon something else, for the whole universe is connected. This is the basis of what is called relative understanding in the work. We may have to know only very little about the whole, in order to understand the part, about which we can know far more, but unless we think relatively our understanding will be wrong. It would be useless, for instance, to try to understand a sparking plug unless one understood something about an engine as a whole, and again about electricity, about man and his needs and so on. This is what science is finding today, namely that every domain of science is connected, and nothing can be understood separately, which is the case with holistic medicine, for every part of the body depends upon some other part, and everything is connected to form the whole body. When we have reached that point, we have to understand about humanity itself, and its significance or meaning on Earth. The ray of creation with the sun octave gives us a relative understanding of man. It is a relative diagram, and must be understood in that light. Many assume incorrectly that there is only one ray of creation. This is of course quite wrong. There are an infinite number. We speak of our ray of creation, the ray we find ourselves in. By it, we find our position in relation to the whole universe. Imagine instead a vast tree. The undivided trunk is the absolute. The first great branches are the note C, all possible systems. You would have to conceive 100 million great branches at least. We then take our great branch, our galaxy. Each great branch divides into 10,000 million lesser branches. These are suns. We take our sun, and so finally come to the twig wherein we dwell in this gigantic tree of the world, and at the end of our twig is a bud called our moon. We cannot imagine this is the only twig and bud, or that the absolute terminates creation in our solitary moon. Just as a tree does not bloom with only one bud each spring. It is necessary that we should form some distinct concept with regard to the octave of the sun. This octave represents, in the form of a diagram, our possibilities of development. We can understand this octave literally, in physical terms, or we can understand it psychologically. Physically, we can see for ourselves that life on Earth depends upon the heat and light of the sun, and believe that in some manner, the physical visible sun created organic life on Earth. We can take the three notes La, Sol, and Fa, sounded by the sun on Earth, as forming the sensitive material on its surface, as representing perhaps mankind, animal life, insect and vegetable life. We can take the note Mi, which passes into the Earth, as the mineral debris of once living forms, the dead star dust interred within the Earth, the deposits of coal, the chalk cliffs, the coral reefs, the tar pits and fossils, which were all once living things. Then we can take the note Re, sounded on the moon, as some interchange of very fine energy. Matters, electrons, atoms, and molecules passing between the Earth and moon, for we know that in the case of the Earth, hundreds of tons of very fine energy matters fall upon its surface from all parts of the universe every day. It's how our history is buried beneath layers and layers of stratum. But there is apart from this literal understanding, another form of understanding, called in the system psychological understanding. When it is said that man is in the universe, and the universe is in man, the first phrase means that man actually stands in the literal, external, visible universe. And if we take the ray in this sense, we take it externally, in terms of the senses, in terms of visible objects seen by a telescope such as Hubble or James Webb. But the second phrase, the universe is in man, can only be understood psychologically. Just as the universe externally is on different levels, for it is obvious that the galaxy taken as one whole physical organism of suns, stands on a higher level than any single sun which is merely an infinitesimally small part of it, so is the universe taken internally, as within man, on different levels. That is man, having the universe in him, existing or aware on different levels, and these levels are levels of being, levels of knowledge and levels of understanding. Psychological things, attained only within us. Someone who reaches the level of the sun in this sense, reaches a level represented externally by the physical sun, and internally by the intelligence belonging to that level. They reach a divine level, and become as a Time Lord, for the intelligence of the sun is divine to us. It is, in our neighborhood at least, the absolute, as far as we are concerned in an immediate, sensory and tangible sense. At this level we must place conscious man, man number 7, conscious in the 7th dimension and in harmony, in synchrony with all other 6 dimensions. Below this level, we must place the central theme of the Gospels, the kingdom of heaven, which is, man fully evolved. And from this level we must understand that all esoteric teaching descends to man on the earth. For the object of esoteric teaching is to raise man to a higher level of himself, and man is created for this purpose. If we think of the sun octave in this way, psychologically, then we can understand how every note in the suboctave represents a possible state, a stage in the development of man. Humanity may fall or rise on this ladder reaching from the sun to the moon. We can be under more laws, or less laws. We can sink, psychologically, to the level of the moon. We can backslide and find ourselves in a prison far worse than the earth, a prison under 96 orders of laws in which we are trapped, sedentary, until the moon itself attains the level of World 48. Or we can rise until we pass under 24 orders of laws, and then finally under 12 orders of laws. If we are a good householder on earth, then we will be under 48 orders of laws. If we overcome personality, we will be under planetary laws, which is 24 orders of laws, for essence lies under 24 laws and not ego or personality. If essence develops, then we will pass under 12 orders of laws, and be at that level of power, intelligence, and being represented as the sun. We will be consciously aware in the seventh dimension, of all three space and all three time dimensions, the Star of David.